King, sir, in reply to a loyal and dutiful address. I have received your humble address praying that I should reappoint Dame Ellen Closs-Stevens as an electoral commissioner with effect from the 13th of March 2025 for a period ending the 12th of March 2027. I will comply with your request.
Right, let us start with the questions. Secretary of State for Defence. Lillian Jones.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to answer questions 1 and 5 together. And if I may, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the House, I'd also like to mark the passing of Group Captain Paddy Hemingway, the last surviving Battle of Britain pilot, one of those strikingly few brave young men that turned the tide of the war and kept our nation safe from Nazi invasion. Mr. Speaker, the fire sale of military family homes by Conservative ministers in 1996 is probably the worst privatisation ever. The government was paying £600,000 a day to rent back the homes, then paying all the repair costs with no power to plan or to do the major upgrades needed. We bought back 36,000 Forces homes in January. We started the Defence Housing Review in February. We aim to publish our housing plans in the summer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend Secretary of State for that response. The men and women of our armed forces perform the ultimate public service. They and their families make considerable sacrifices to keep all of us in the UK safe and secure. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the least we owe our servicemen and women is decent housing that they can proudly call home?
Yeah. My honourable friend is right. The sacrifice that those who serve in uniform make to keep us all safe is exceptional. The least their families deserve is a decent home. It's, after all, the heart of all our lives. The steps we've taken with the buyback of the Annington homes is a decisive break from the past, and we will now put in place the necessary plans to upgrade Forces family homes for the future.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Defence owns over 300 houses in the former Arborfield garrison in my constituency. Only a handful are occupied by service families. The remainder are let privately but are increasingly left vacant, which, with the estate also not being maintained, is affecting the lives of constituents. I'm told that no decisions can be taken on the future until a housing strategy is completed. Can an early decision be taken by the Ministry of Defence on the housing in Arborfield to stop the neglect and return much needed affordable housing to the market?
Well, if the honourable gentleman would like to write to me with the specifics, I will certainly look into that. But he sets out for the House some of the character of the nature of neglect and decline that we've seen in our forces housing for so long, and the bind that governments have been in the past without the power or control to do the upgrades and make the plans for wholesale renewal for the future. That is what our housing review will start to fix. We can't fix these deep-seated long-run problems overnight, but we are determined to do better than we've done in the past.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Secretary of State reassure Forces families in North Durham that the Labour government is ending the failed papering over the cracks approach that the previous Conservative government had, and it is instead taking action to deliver new, high-quality family homes for our service personnel over the years to come?
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker. He and I stood on a manifesto in which we were elected as a government to end the scandal of Forces family homes. The buyback that we've put in place now is the start to deliver on that promise for Army and other Forces families, and to deliver, as we are on a number of fronts, for defence.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Speaker. The litany of complaints I received from service families in Gosport in accommodation include damp, black mould, unsafe electrical wiring and wastewater flowing into homes. One constituent wrote to me, "The overall condition of our flat is unfit for purpose, unhygienic and quite frankly a threat to our safety." Now this has been going on for decades and under successive governments, and our service people quite simply deserve better. Their families deserve better. So what I want to know on behalf of my Gosport constituents from the Secretary of State is, when will we begin to see tangible differences? Pinnacle and Vivo are not fit for purpose. When will we see them actually being replaced with an organisation that can do these repairs and do them properly? And I'd love to invite the Secretary of State to Gosport to come and see some of this appalling service family accommodation for himself.
The Honourable Lady is right. It is shameful. Her government had 14 years to fix the problem. We are now doing that job. We have a policy in place which means that no one should be let a home with apparent damp and mould problems, that there is a special dedicated report line for that, and if the problems are severe, then they should be offered alternative accommodation. But the Housing Defence Review that we now have underway, that will report in the summer, will set out the plans for that long-term overhaul of these very deep-seated and overdue neglect of these problems.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Have you got that? Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as a new government, we've stepped up and speeded up the UK's military aid to Ukraine. This year, the UK will provide £4.5 billion in military support, the highest ever sum. We're fully behind President Trump's pledge to bring a lasting peace to Ukraine. We want to see success in the talks today, but we won't jeopardise the peace by forgetting about the war.
Sir Ashley.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for his answer. Over the weekend, President Trump's special envoy dismissed the Prime Minister's plan for an international force to support the ceasefire in Ukraine, calling a posture and a pose. Whatever the wisdom of those remarks, does the Defence Secretary see a future where UK forces could deploy on peacekeeping operations in Ukraine without a US security guarantee?
Mr. Speaker, as the Chief of the Defence Staff said over the weekend, no one should be in doubt that the work that the UK with France is leading to pull together a coalition of nations willing to step in and help ensure the lasting peace in any negotiated settlement in Ukraine is critical and substantial. The UK is determined and will lead that effort.
Tom Rockland.
This year, the UK is providing Ukraine more financial aid through military support than at any time since Putin's illegal invasion. Does the Minister agree with me that it is crucial to wider European security and our own security here in the UK that we continue to support Ukraine and ramp up the pressure on Putin?
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker. Putting the Ukrainians in the strongest possible position as they choose to go into discussions is part of the responsibility and commitment of this government. We plan the support we provide very closely with Ukraine. Our 2025 plan to support Ukraine has been developed with them and reflects what they need most: drones, air defences, ammunition, which is why this month the Prime Minister announced a £1.6 billion deal to supply more than 5,000 LMMs, air defence missiles built in the UK. So both backing the Ukrainians in their fight and boosting British jobs and business.
Sir Julian Lewis.
In this age when the plot of the Manchurian Candidate appears more like a documentary on US politics than a work of fiction, has the government received any indication that its efforts militarily to support Ukraine would be actively opposed or blocked by the Trump administration?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has made clear that the security arrangements or guarantees in Ukraine, in the context of a negotiated peace, will need US support. I've made the same point strongly in my discussions with Secretary Hegseth, and my job now as Defence Secretary is to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position by continuing levels of UK military aid, encouraging other nations to do more, and to develop alongside the French the plans for a multinational support to keep the long-term security of any peace in Ukraine?
Paul Wall.
Rochdale's Ukrainian community is fervently proud of what the Prime Minister has done in recent weeks, not just on the diplomatic front, but also record amounts of support for Ukraine militarily. But does the Secretary of State agree with me it's really important to call out the Russian lies and propaganda that have been propagated of late, including the lie that somehow Ukraine is not a real country, that it's a fake country, and also somehow the lie that Britain's security does not also depend on Ukraine's security?
My honourable friend is right. The first line of defence of the UK and of Europe is in Ukraine. They share our values. They are fighting with huge courage, military and civilians alike. It's our job to stand with them during the fight in order to safeguard their future and their ability to make their own decisions as a country. And if and when they go into the negotiations, we will stand with them then, and we will stand with them after a negotiated peace that we all hope President Trump is capable of securing.
So, Secretary of State, James Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate the opposition with the remarks, Secretary of State, on Paddy Hemingway, the last of the few to whom we owe so much? On the potential peacekeeping force for Ukraine, we've heard from the Secretary of State that this is jointly British and French. In fact, he stressed in every one of his answers the amount of work we are doing with France. So is it therefore not extraordinary that at the very same time France should be working to undermine our defence industry by having us excluded from a £150 billion European defence fund, which will include other non-EU states?
Well, the honourable gentleman's a sort of half-empty rather than half-full type of guy, isn't he? Look, the European Union, when they produced their defence and security white paper last week, set in place specific arrangements for any third nation, like the UK, that strikes a defence and security partnership with the European Union, exactly what we went to the country with as a promise to undertake as a UK government. Any country with a partnership in place then has potentially access to those sort of programmes, that sort of funding, and that's what we will try and negotiate for this country and our industry.
James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can assure the Secretary I am full bifters behind our armed forces and the UK defence industry. Isn't this the point? We provide unconditionally to European NATO countries our nuclear deterrent 24/7. Our army is in Estonia defending Europe's eastern flank, and we have done more than any other European nation to support Ukraine. So can I ask the Secretary of State if he and the Prime Minister will stand up to President Macron and stress to him this is the worst possible time to prioritise fishing rights over Europe's collective security?
I just say to the honourable gentleman, look, drop that Brexit rhetoric. We are leading efforts with the French government and the French military to meet the challenge of the US and the requirements of the Ukraine to have a coalition of countries willing to stand with Ukraine in the context of a negotiated peace to help them secure enduring stability and deterrence to prevent Russia re-invading that sovereign country.
Alan Miller.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to answer question 3 and 19 together. I've always said you train people to join the military, train them to be in the military. We don't necessarily train them to be a civilian when they leave. And that's why this government has taken swift action to support veterans upon leaving. Last month, I launched Ascend, which will help veterans thrive into post-service careers. Our hugely successful career transition partnership has now seen 88% of all veterans leaving straight into employment since October. We've extended national insurance contributions relief from April 2026 for employers who recruit veterans. And on top of that, this government has awarded £3.7 million in veterans' housing grants. I'm a firm believer that for the last 14 years, we haven't taken enough responsibility for supporting our veterans, and plans that we will unveil in the future will actually take a step in the right direction to improving that.
Lord Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for his response. I recently visited the Hayford and Bicester Veterans Group in my constituency, which was set up by Ian Ridley to support fellow veterans across the region. This fantastic initiative brings together a range of services from charities, the NHS and local authorities to support veterans. Yet in speaking to Ian, I was amazed to discover that there is no funding from the MOD and that veterans in our region are not signposted towards its services when they leave the armed forces. So may I invite the Minister to come with me and visit this fantastic work so we can also discuss how we can make it more routine that the kinds of services it offers are made available to our fantastic veterans.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for making those points, and I'd like to thank all of the individuals that are probably primarily volunteers supporting veterans within his constituency. I just 2 days ago visited another tri-service veterans hub that is delivering probably exactly the same types of services, and what we often find is a lot of support out there, but it's actually navigating veterans to the right place to get it, and we're working on plans to help them navigate that process to get the help they need.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Harrogate is a proud armed forces town with the Army Foundation College located in it. Nearby, we've also got Menwith Hill and Catterick. North Yorkshire as a whole plays an important part for our armed forces. One of the things that I've heard from speaking to veterans in my constituency is that they've often moved back there after postings throughout their career. When they return to North Yorkshire, they're having issues accessing housing through the local authority. So what conversations is the Minister having with local government colleagues to ensure that local authorities better understand how to listen to the needs and adaptations that veterans need when accessing local authority housing?
I'd like to again thank the honourable member for the question. As he well knows, access to housing, social and affordable housing across the country is a severe issue. We work with a lot of local councils explaining to them the covenant as a whole and trying to get veterans fast-tracked. Op Fortitude is a prime example of that. We've had 3,000 referrals, 825 veterans put into housing in a relatively short period of time, and I'd like to connect you up with them to ensure any veterans that need that support, we can signpost them in the right direction.
Catherine Atkinson.
Speaker, I visited Richard, a veteran in his home provided by Daventio Housing, which is a trust in Derby that offers homes for those without, including those who served in our armed forces. And volunteers from Daventio recently renovated a house in the city specifically for veterans. Does the Minister agree with me that support like this is vital? And can he tell us what the government is doing to help provide housing, care and support for our veterans in need?
I'd like to thank for the points made and also congratulate the individuals within that specific charity and trust for supporting the veterans within a constituency. One thing I've realised as visiting so many different parts of the UK now is the phenomenal volunteer support that veterans often have to rely on. And what we would like to do as we move forward is put in place a structure that helps focus that support, but also direct veterans to the support they need in a faster and more effective way. And those are the plans that we'll look to unveil in due course.
Speaker, will the Minister meet with me and other members of the APPG on the armed forces to discuss rolling out the best practice of some fire authorities to give those who've served our country an automatic interview in relevant roles in the public sector? I think this is a brilliant idea that would really benefit my constituents in Darlington, and I think those who've gone above and beyond to serve our country should be served by all of us on their return.
I think this is a great initiative. Service beyond service is something we should be promoting, and I'd like to take that as best practice, have a look at it and see if we can roll it out across the nation. So when individuals leave the military, they can get at least a first interview into the fire service, the police, the NHS or any other public services available. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you, sir. Veterans who served in Northern Ireland will no doubt welcome the Veterans Minister's decision, as first suggested by the Shadow Defence Secretary, that the MOD should judicially review the recent coroner's verdict regarding the shooting of several IRA terrorists at Clonno. Well done. But why not go further to protect veterans and drop the plans to revoke large parts of the Northern Ireland Legacy Act, which would only serve to facilitate yet more inquests of this type?
Very good. Very good. So I'd like to thank the honourable member for what is a really important point. And I share the concerns and visited Northern Ireland just 2 weeks ago of many veterans who've served in Northern Ireland. And in particular, the misinterpretation of the challenging context of which a lot of these inquests and inquiries are taking place. And may I remember both sides of the House that not so long ago, in the 70s, 80s and 90s, there were major explosions in every major city in the UK. There were assassinations taking place across the UK. That killings were a regular event in Northern Ireland, and we sent our service personnel there to protect peace, save lives and indeed prevent a civil war.
Sides of the House. Revoking the Legacy Act would encourage a system of two-tier justice, one for our army veterans and another for alleged IRA terrorists, including those given so-called letters of comfort by the Blair regime. Now, with many of those veterans having served in proud regiments which traditionally recruited from Red Wall northern constituencies, why should a Labour government assist Gerry Adams to sue the British taxpayer? How is that supporting those who serve their country valiantly on Operation Banner?
Let's just be absolutely clear. You're looking at an individual who served his country on Operational Banner. So I understand the issues for all of our veterans, and I've been working very, very hard with the Northern Ireland Office to make sure that veterans' welfare and legal services are provided to ensure that anyone involved in any of the investigations get the support they require, and we can minimise the impact on what are quite a unique group of elderly veterans.
Nick Timothy.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer questions 4 and 7 together. We are committed to maintaining and enhancing the security and resilience of critical undersea infrastructure, just as the Defence Secretary called out the activities of the Russian spy ship Yantar hovering over our undersea cables. Let those who threaten the UK or allies be in no doubt that we will defend our undersea infrastructure. This is just one area that the Strategic Defence Review is looking at in order to enhance our homeland security.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for the answer. In January, I asked the Defence Secretary which single minister is responsible for the security of offshore infrastructure. We know Russia and China target interconnectors and undersea cables. We know Russia places listening devices on our wind turbines to monitor submarines, and we know that China controls the tech in the turbines that the Energy Secretary wants to buy. The Defence Secretary couldn't answer me in January, and neither did the Prime Minister when I asked him about this earlier this month. So when are we going to find out who is actually in charge?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind the Prime Minister is responsible for the security of this nation, and he delegates different areas to different departments. That is a completely normal way of dealing with our national security. But within Defence, let's be absolutely clear, within Defence, we take it seriously, and we work with our cross-departmental colleagues to make sure that not only are we securing our infrastructure from a defence perspective, we're using our trade routes to make sure that we are protecting and buying the right technology, and we're using our planning system to make sure that where there is development, it doesn't impinge on our national security.
Bob Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will be well aware that 99% of internet traffic is carried on undersea cables, and clearly the Russians and other enemies would seek to disrupt that. Will the Minister look at utilising autonomous minesweepers that can therefore be deployed to protect our undersea cables? And in particular, will he commit to be looking at introducing that in the Black Sea if there is actually a truce between Russia and Ukraine, so that their cables are protected as well, because that's part of the NATO infrastructure?
Well, I'm grateful for his question. He's right that data subsea fibre optic cables carry out 99% of our data. Many people believe it's satellites, but it's actually cables. As a country, we're investing in new technologies, and I would expect that as we get further down towards the time when the Strategic Defence Review is published, he will be able to see the ambition that we have as a government to invest more in autonomous systems, not only to support undersea cable protection, but also to deal with the threats of Russian submarines and other capability and other threats to our nations, making sure that we're investing in our defence capabilities and supporting those people who serve as well.
Are you standing? Tell me you're standing. I wasn't sure whether you'd change your mind. Chair of the Select Committee, Tamanji Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, with escalating threats to our critical infrastructure, I was concerned by reports over the weekend that our armed forces chiefs are apparently being gagged over the upcoming Strategic Defence Review, which of course, has been described by some as limp. I'm fully aware that recognising the dangers that the government has invested or announced the largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Second World War. But at this critical time, we certainly should not be sidelining our service chiefs or penny pinching on our nation's defence. So would the Minister like to take this opportunity to reassure the nation that our Strategic Defence Review, when published, will be bold, ambitious and anything but limp?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. We live in incredibly difficult times, and that is why this government is meeting the moment with increased defence spending, the biggest reform of our defence in 50 years, investing in new technologies, investing in our people that keep our country safe, and from the most senior generals and admirals down to privates and sailors, giving all our armed forces that renewed determination to make sure that they understand how we defend our country in best interest, but that the nation backs them in defending our country as well. There'll be more announcements further to come, Mr. Speaker, but let us all be in no doubt that this whole House backs our armed forces and that we look forward to the further investment that we're seeing coming in our defence in due course.
Look, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the UK's leadership on this issue? The proposed Aquin interconnector raises serious concerns about the security of UK undersea infrastructure, particularly given the significant political donations made by its owners to various Conservative politicians. So will the Secretary of State, further to the previous question, confirm that the SDR will include protecting domestic security as a central focus?
Well, I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman for his question. I met recently with a cross-party delegation, including Labour MPs for Portsmouth and the Conservative MP for Fareham as well, to talk about the Aquin interconnector. It is part of a planning decision being taken by the Department for Energy, so it's difficult for me to comment on. But let me be absolutely clear that we take defending our underwater infrastructure very seriously and will continue to make decisions that support that defence in due course.
Sarah Dyke.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 24 years, I've had the absolute privilege of working with amazing servicewomen across the armed forces, but also within the police, the NHS, and of course our intelligence service. There is no place for unacceptable behaviours in defence, absolutely no place at all, and women who choose to serve deserve better. This government is taking action. Just last week, I announced the launch of a long-called-for tri-service complaints unit that will sit outside of the chain of command, and therefore the single services won't be able to or be perceived to be marking their own homework. I'm working cross-government, in particular with the members of Pontypridd and Birmingham Yardley, on the set-up of a Defence Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force. And just 2 weeks ago, I met with the Women's Network, but also sat on the Raising Our Standards panel, which is from across trade and other organisations, to really criticise us and pull forward any lessons learned from broader society.
Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his response and the work that he's done. But the 2024 Armed Forces Continuous Attitude Survey reported that 13% of female personnel experienced sexual harassment in service during the prior 12 months, and many women have said they wouldn't report an incident due to the fear of the consequences. The new Tri-Services scheme announced recently is welcome, but what steps is the Minister taking to make it genuinely independent to ensure women's confidence in the scheme and that their safety while serving in the armed forces?
I think there's two principal elements. The tri-service complaint system will sit outside of the chain of command, and when certain issues hit a threshold, will be taken away from the single services, so they'll be completely independent. The second is the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force that we've created. That will work directly to me, be a small team sat at my level, but it will have tentacles right down into the single services that will provide a safe space for women to go to if they want to raise an issue, a complaint, which can then be transferred either into the complaint system or indeed parallel all the way up to me so I can take action directly.
Some folks.
Diolch, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. I welcome the measures announced last week. My constituents of Monmouthshire and those people across wider Wales would be really interested to hear more from the Minister about the new Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force and the regional and national champions, and how that will ensure everyone who serves in the armed forces can do so in safety.
I'd refer to the answer to my last question, but that Violence on Women and Girl Task Force is really taking best practice from the rest of government and ensuring it's replicated in defence, but actually going one step further and putting a structure in place. And I always say, when I joined the Marines and I was really young and you're caught in this hierarchical situation, where do you go to make a complaint? You don't actually have anywhere to go to make a complaint. What this will provide is a safe space that if people want to pop right at the chain of command, highlight a concern, that it can be elevated quickly and dealt with rapidly.
Helen Maguire, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the creation of the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force. It's an important step towards enabling complaints being heard and addressed outside of the chain of command. And I thank my right honourable friend for raising this important issue. Like the task force, the government is committed to a new veteran strategy, specifically focusing on the experience of women who have left the service. Will the Minister outline the timescale for the development and implementation of this strategy, given how vital it is that women do come and serve in the armed forces and they feel safe and secure in doing so?
So as part of our future veteran strategy, there will be a women's veterans annex to that, which will provide specific guidance on females want to leave the armed forces. And it's also important to mention it's not just the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force we're setting up. We've got the sexual harassment survey going out, we've got the tri-service complaints system, we've got the review of our zero tolerance policy by KC to move to 100% action, we've got an international culture and behaviours conference to learn best lessons off our international partners, and we've got modernising our military appraisal system to ensure people do get involved in unacceptable behaviour, it tracks through the system so they can be held to account.
Dr Neil Shastrahurst.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Defence Secretary raised this issue at the meeting of all NATO defence ministers in February and has held a number of discussions with NATO allies since, including with the US Secretary of Defence and in meetings with JEF and E5 allies. European allies are stepping up within NATO, and the UK is leading efforts to increase defence spending and expand defence industrial capacity.
Dr Neil Shastrahurst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I concur with my honourable friend's comments about the deep disappointment that France has blocked European Union countries from allowing safe funds to be used for procurement of British weapons. With that in mind, what has the Minister done to ensure that actions are being taken to guarantee a multilateral NATO-wide procurement strategy with the UK at the centre of it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have met with a number of my equivalents bilaterally, but I think it's important to say that we welcome REARM, that initiative, and it's in all of our interests for the Security Action for Europe to allow Member States to partner with the UK. We're going to continue to emphasise the need for EU defence financing and wider defence industrial initiatives to include third countries like the UK. And as my right honourable friend said in answer to an earlier question, we want to conclude a UK-EU defence and security pact which will give us access to that scheme.
Darwin Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Minister for her response. Last week, the Defence Select Committee met with the Chief of General Staff, who highlighted the challenges of supporting our troops in Estonia. And I highlighted the Rail Baltica project, which has received significant funding from the EU's Connecting Europe facility and NATO, and links my constituency in Leighton via High Speed 1 right through to the Baltics using British steel. Would the Minister meet with me to discuss supporting the expansion of HS1 capacity as the type of opportunity that would support growth within our defence industrial strategy, increases our deterrence and commitment to European allies, whilst bringing high-quality jobs to East London?
So I thank my honourable friend for his question, and as I hope members around the House are starting to realise, if I get asked for a meeting, my general answer to it is yes, so I'm very happy to meet with him.
Speaker number 9.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we inherited a broken recruitment system from the Conservatives. We promised to take steps to fix it, and we are. The largest pay increase in 20 years for those who serve, 35% pay increase for recruits, scrapped over 100 outdated medical practices, created a new direct entry cyber pathway, a conditional offer within 10 days of applying, and a training start date within 30 days, and we've announced a new tri-service recruitment scheme to attract the very best to our armed forces.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his response? My constituency of Dartford has a proud military history. with the need to expand our armed forces, which we see at the moment, how can we help a new generation of young people in Dartford to access highly skilled and rewarding careers across all the armed forces?
Can I thank him for his question? Not only is a career in our armed forces good for a young person, it also offers training opportunities. Each of our single services appearing in the top 5 of apprentices employers, the very best in our country. But a career in defence industry is also good for our young people, and the ability to move between regular and reserve and industry more frequently, more easily, not only secures the national defence of our country, provides more opportunities for our young people, but also means that defence can be an even better and bigger engine for growth. And that's the proposals that we'll be coming forward with in due course.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent years, for every 100 servicemen that are recruited, 130 have left. That is a completely unsustainable situation. So what is the Minister doing to ensure that we retain more troops? That means not only the package within our armed forces, but competitive packages in the private sector.
Well, the honourable gentleman is entirely right about the terrible state of armed forces retention that we inherited. We've seen armed forces morale drop from 60% in 2010 to only 40% in July last year. So we do need to invest more in our armed forces. That's why we've given the biggest pay rise in 20 years. That's why we're bringing defence housing back into public control so it can be invested in. But it's also why we're creating the Armed Forces Commissioner to provide an independent champion for service welfare matters for those who serve. But we do need to invest more, and that's why, together with my ministerial colleagues, we've created an Armed Forces Retention and Recruitment Board within the MOD to focus efforts on improving service life for all those who serve and their families.
Josh Babylon.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you for the question. We are moving forward with, as mentioned before, our Women and Girls Task Force to drive progress towards a government commitment to half violence against women and girls in a decade. Last year, we launched the Defence's Domestic Abuse Action Plan, and we trained over 700 service police and specialist domestic abuse and coercive control training, and now everybody in the military goes through unacceptable sexual behaviour training, every man and woman across the armed forces.
Josh Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to King's College London, 1 in 10 of our armed forces personnel are survivors of domestic abuse. But because there is no specific offence of domestic abuse in the law, the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that they can't comprehensively identify perpetrators, therefore cannot comprehensively rehabilitate them, and therefore cannot comprehensively keep victims and survivors safe. So will the Minister join me and colleagues across this House in campaigning for a specific offence of domestic abuse in the law so that we can better protect our armed forces personnel from domestic abuse?
So it's completely clear to me that any sort of domestic abuse in any way, shape or form in the armed forces is completely unacceptable. And if we can help address and track some of that through the armed forces, it makes us far easier to deal with and rehabilitate. So I'll take the conversation on after these questions.
Lord Telpington.
Question number 11, Mr.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. UK defence networks face a range of state threats and malign actors. In 2024, the National Cyber Security Centre received 1,957 reports of cyber attacks. 89 were nationally significant, 12 severe in nature. The government continues to improve resilience and response options to these threats.
Lord Telpington.
I thank the Minister for his answer. As part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, together with colleagues, I recently visited the 77th Brigade and learnt more about the amazing work that the men and women of that brigade are doing to tackle Russian disinformation in Eastern Europe and elsewhere. That trip came just a few days after the United States President announced his decision to cease altogether American Russian disinformation, offensive cyber operations against Russia. That's led to growing concerns that willing countries don't have the capacity or the ability to tackle that particular threat. Can the Minister tell us what assessment has been done about the capabilities that we have within the United Kingdom to tackle that threat? And would he agree with me that that places greater pressure on the 77th Brigade and other agencies? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The 77 Brigade do a superb job in tackling disinformation, especially those by malign actors. We need to expand our provision and our range of capabilities. That is precisely why we've created a new direct entry cyber pathway, recruiting people directly into our cyber forces to support our national resilience, both defensive and offensive operations. He'll understand that I can't talk about ongoing operations, but let me tell him we're investing more in this area to keep ourselves and our allies safe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With GCHQ, the UK's cyber operations are genuinely world-leading. So what assurances can the Minister give the House that we will continue to provide Ukraine support with our cyber security?
Mr. Speaker, we have made very clear that we will continue supporting Ukraine, not only to put them in the very best possible position on the battlefield in any negotiations to come, but to secure their critical national infrastructure, working with their defence and civilian sectors, which are incredibly impressive in this area, to make sure they have the technology, the training and the access to support to keep themselves and their country safe. We'll continue that work.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 12.
Mr. Speaker, when the British public elected us as the new government, we said Labour will seek an ambitious new UK-EU security pact to strengthen cooperation on the threats that we face. We will rebuild relationships with key European allies, and so with NATO as the cornerstone of our security in Europe, that is exactly what we are doing.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his response. Given President Trump's increasing unpredictability and shifting policies, would the Minister share how the Government is strengthening defence procurement agreements with European partners to enhance our capabilities and reduce our reliance on the United States?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I spoke last week with High Representative Callas and I spoke with Commissioner Kubilius, that was exactly what I discussed. Closer defence collaboration that will see a stronger European effort, UK and the EU, but within the NATO framework, which is the cornerstone for all of us to keep ourselves safe.
Josh Dewberry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Cannock Chase have steadfastly supported the people of Ukraine since Russia's illegal invasion. But can the Secretary of State confirm that collective support for Ukraine will be a major focus of his discussions with EU counterparts, and that under this government the UK will always lead the way in stepping up support for Ukraine?
Indeed, I can, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend makes an important point. This is a period which is critical for Ukraine, is critical for European security, and I hope that he sees a UK government stepping up to provide stronger support for Ukraine, coordinating allies to do more, stepping up also on European security, and above all, stepping up on defence spending.
Democrat spokesperson Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we support the Government's commitment to strengthening defence ties with our European partners, but it needs to go further and faster to ensure that the UK doesn't get left behind. Has the Defence Secretary spoken with his counterparts in the UA about the value of the new standalone UK-EU Defence Pact, which would enable the UK to better influence decisions around new finance programmes like a rearmament bank supporting defence investment across Europe?
Yes, last week I met with High Representative Callas. I spoke with Commissioner Kubilius, and that was exactly the subject of our conversations.
Jamie Stone.
Number 13, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is fully committed to the Joint Expeditionary Force. I discussed the JEF in my visits in Denmark, Latvia, Finland, Lithuania and Netherlands last month, and I meet regularly with the JEF partners' defence attachés, including last week.
Jamie Stone.
I thank the Minister for his answer, and clearly we do have a particularly good relationship with those countries that make up the Joint Expeditionary Force. Mr. Speaker, the Minister and I have both completed the Parliamentary Armed Forces scheme and have both plunged into the snowdrifts in Norway at Bardufoss. Some of the kit the Norwegians had was particularly impressive, I'm sure the Minister would agree. So could I press the Minister, what work can we do with these countries in the Joint Expeditionary Force on the front of procurement and design and perhaps development of equipment?
Just to clarify to the House, there were different snowdrifts at different times, otherwise there could be stories around there. But let me say to the honourable gentleman that the more procurement we can do with our allies, not only the better in terms of interoperable that equipment will be, the better it will be in interchangeability, and with the opportunities in the High North with P8s, F-35s and potentially Type 26 frigates being shared by common nations in the High North, there's a huge opportunity to work together more closely, creating more jobs and a more effective deterrence against Russian aggression.
Number 14, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question. I've visited multiple cadet units now all over the country, and I've been truly astounded at the social mobility cadets provides for a whole range of youth, over 140,000 cadets that we have at the moment, supported by 26,000 volunteers. And we're doing everything we can over time to look to expand those programmes and ensure the opportunity is available for everybody from every walk of life.
Thank you, Mr. And I thank the Minister for his answer. In my role as the new chair of the British Shooting Sports Council, I take a very keen interest in cadet target rifle shooting. And the Minister will be aware that the Ministry of Defence is proposing to withdraw from service the 7.62 target rifle, cadet rifle, from 2026 and the 2.2 rifle just 2 years later. Aside from depriving cadets from the opportunity to learn the highly disciplined and valuable skill of firearm safety and use, it calls into question the future of target rifle shooting within the UK. Would the Minister be prepared to meet with me and representatives of the shooting community and target rifle community to come along and discuss opportunities to try to reverse this?
I'd like to thank you again for the point, and I would quite happily come and talk through that in due course. Being in the military for 24 years, I spent a lot of time shooting, and I can see the benefits of it, so absolutely.
Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 15, please.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, SMEs can help us make defence an engine for growth in all of our nations and regions. I want to see far more involvement from SMEs in our procurement, providing agility, innovation and resilience as we seek to ramp up our industrial production. That's why the Prime Minister recently launched a new Defence SME Support Hub and committed us to publish a new target for MOD spend with SMEs.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Minister for her response. Last week, as part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, had the privilege of visiting His Majesty's Royal Naval Base in Portsmouth to meet personnel and see equipment made and currently in use in our armed forces, made by Accuracy International and Sig Sauer, an SME firearms manufacturer in my constituency of Portsmouth North. Mr. Speaker, Accuracy International provides employment for over 100 local people. Can I ask the Minister what she is doing to ensure companies like Accuracy International and Sig Sauer are given a fair shot in procurement of defence and continue to provide jobs in my city?
A fair shot. So, I'd like to commend her on her puns, but I know that Accuracy International have made a great contribution to UK defence and export. I've been talking to defence firms, many of these SMEs, during the Defence Industrial Strategy consultation, and I hope that the changes we're going to make to speed up procurement and provide more access to opportunities will transform the chances they have of doing business with us, whilst making defence an engine for growth across all of our nations and regions.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are shortly to appoint a National Armaments Director at a salary of over £600,000 a year. And I hope that colossal salary comes with it the mandate to be able to tear up the book when it comes to defence procurement as we rearm the nation. So can the front bench reassure us that when we get the National Armaments Director back to the Defence Select Committee in a year's time, they aren't saying, well, we tried to change things, but they wouldn't let me?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable gentleman that we're tearing up the way in which procurement works before the National Armament Director actually moves into his place. One of the biggest jobs in government, and a job that needs the right salary to attract the right person. I'm absolutely clear that we will be doing things differently, and the National Armaments Director will be held accountable for making sure that we do.
We now come to topicals. Gurinder Singh Jassan.
Topical question on, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, a lot has happened since the last defence oral 6 weeks ago. The Prime Minister has announced the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, hitting 2.5% of GDP by 2027, 3% in the next Parliament. I've chaired the Ukraine Defence Contact Group of nearly 50 countries, the first European Defence Minister to do so, which secured an extra €1.5 billion worth of military support for Ukraine. And with France, the UK is leading plans to to put together a coalition of the willing to secure any peace deal in Ukraine, with 31 nations joining a planning meeting last week at Permanent Joint Headquarters, with further meetings there this week as we accelerate that planning. Mr. Speaker, this is a government stepping up on European security, stepping up on Ukraine, stepping up on defence spending, and in all areas. This is the UK leadership in action.
Gurinder Singh Jassam.
Mr. Speaker, the government commitment to use defence procurement to strengthen our industrial sector is very welcome. Can the Minister please outline how the government is supporting local manufacturers across the UK and ensuring that defence contracts contribute to long-term industrial growth and job creation, in particular encouraging and supporting companies like Parget Housewares in my constituency, a private ethnic minority-owned business and one of the UK's largest producers of pot and pans and bakeware using advanced and extremely energy-efficient techniques.
Mr. Speaker, I can indeed. My honourable friend is right. SMEs are often the driver of productivity, the driver of innovation, and we recently announced that we will be setting targets for an increasing share of defence contracts to go to SMEs, alongside the formation of a new Defence Innovation Office.
James Cartledge, Shadow Secretary of State.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If our forces go to Ukraine, it will be as part of a peacekeeping mission. But as the Veterans Minister reminded us earlier, on Operation Banner, that was also described as being there to keep the peace. Yet decades later, those who served are being hounded in our courts, and in Iraq, our soldiers were subjected to hundreds of vexatious claims. So if our forces go to Ukraine, will the Secretary of State consider derogating from the ECHR so as to maximise our protection against possible lawfare?
Mr. Speaker, if we go into Ukraine, we will be going into a negotiated peace, not a shooting war. Our aim is to secure borders, is to ensure safe skies, is to ensure safe seas. I just ask the honourable gentleman, is he saying that he will not support a UK mission and UK troops without that derogation?
Of course not. The Secretary of State knows perfectly well the Labour government derogated from the ECHR after 9/11. And there is a country in Europe which has derogated from the ECHR since 2015. That is Ukraine. It's because there's a war on. And surely he would recognise, even if it's a peacekeeping force, there will still be threats. And Russian nationals have been particularly adept at lawfare in our own courts. So I ask him, surely he will at least consider giving the maximum protection to our armed forces from vexatious claims by derogating from the ECHR if there is a deployment.
Our armed forces will always have our fullest support. And just to be clear to the honourable gentleman, we are responding now, alongside France, to put together a coalition of the willing, responding to the challenge from the US for Europe to step up on Ukraine. We are responding to the requirement from Ukraine for security arrangements that will give them the conviction and confidence that any negotiated peace will last. That is a worthy mission. It's one that the UK is leading, and I would hope that it has the support of all sides of this House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our troops must be able to trust the body armour that they wear to keep them safe. So can the Minister for the Armed Forces update the House on how withdrawing cracked, enhanced combat body armour is going, and when everyone in our forces can expect to know that their body armour is safe?
Well, thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I fully agree with him. On something as fundamental as body armour, Mr. Speaker, we back our troops. I ordered immediate action to replace ECBA on the front line, flying new body armour to units worldwide. Rapid testing of plates is underway, and our people should know that their safety matters to this government, and we will act to keep them safe.
John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week it was announced that the SNP government are sending more shipbuilding contracts abroad. 7 CalMac ferries that could be constructed on the Clyde will instead be built in Poland. So can the Minister share how many warships the United Kingdom government are currently building in Scotland?
Excellent question.
As Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman will probably know, there are the Type 31s being built at Rosyth and the Type 26 is being built at Govan. So we've got a programme for 8 at Govan. We've got so far 5 at Rosyth. So that's the current number.
8 plus 5. Oliver Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know all too well, Lancashire has a proud defence manufacturing pedigree at the cutting edge of our British sovereign capability. You think manufacturing, you think Lancashire. Will the Minister for Procurement continue to champion Lancashire's defence jobs, and will she commit, although I understand this is cheeky, to replacing the Tranche 1 Typhoon aircraft with new, modern, Lancashire-made Typhoons? Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, can I commend my honourable friend for the way in which he's asked this question? He will know that the Strategic Defence Review is considering our current mix of 4th and 5th generation aircraft, but he'll also know that in addition to the Typhoon in Lancashire, they also make 15% of the F-35, 37% of the Typhoon, and so there is work aplenty no matter which aeroplane is bought in Lancashire.
Franklin.
My constituent Sam served in Afghanistan and suffers from PTSD. Although he's entitled to compensation, his condition has left him struggling with the forms, and 10 years on he's been told he can only have £600 when he's entitled to thousands. Can the Minister explain what steps are being taken to ensure those who give so much serving our country are helped to access the financial assistance they are entitled to and not blocked by bureaucracy?
Yeah. I think that's a really valid question. We pay out over 1.5 billion a year in compensation, the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme and the War Pension Scheme. So if you'd like to write to me on that specific case, I can have a look into it. But I'd also refer you to Op Courage, which is obviously linked to mental health and has 34,000 referrals to date.
Does the Minister agree with me that as we expand military expenditure, it creates a golden opportunity to deal with the shortage of people going into science, technology and engineering jobs? And as we expand the military budget, we should make sure the defence industry is expanding the number of apprenticeships and building a robust skills and training base so that young people can benefit from those jobs.
Well, I agree very much with my honourable friend, and of course there are skill shortages across much of manufacturing, not only defence, and so there is certainly going to be an issue. But I can tell my honourable friend that the apprentices that I've met in the defence industry tend to smile the whole time. They are getting extremely good training for lifelong excellent jobs, so I'm absolutely certain that we can get that across to young people and ensure that defence gets its fair share of the skilled people that we need.
Mr. Speaker, with the UK frozen out of the EU rearmament scheme, whilst defence contracts and security firms in Albania, Norway and South Korea stand to benefit, what estimates has the Secretary of State made about the potential loss of economic activity in the UK as a result of that?
Look, the strongest argument for saying that there needs to be UK collaboration and cooperation with the EU and across Europe is that some of our best capabilities, from Typhoons to Meteors to Storm Shadow, have been developed with multinational efforts, including the UK. It's that sort of collaboration we want to secure for the future. The EU White Paper gives us a basis for starting to negotiate that.
Thanks.
We are incredibly proud of our veterans in Peterborough. Will the Minister join with me in recognising the work of Councillor Jason McNally, our Armed Forces champion, and his predecessor, Councillor John Fox, and tell us what more the government can do to help them support more people signing up to the Armed Forces Covenant?
I'd like to thank the honourable member for highlighting two amazing individuals who are, I can imagine, providing a huge amount of hours to supporting the veterans community and indeed the armed forces community. The Covenant will come into law in 2026, and when it does, we need to make sure that those armed forces champions understand what that provides at the local level and can harness its benefits for the whole of the armed forces.
John Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The Hawk aircraft, most famous in the scarlet livery of the Red Arrows, is at the end of its service life. Can the front bench explain to us what steps they are taking to make sure we are going to replace that with a British-built sovereign capability?
The honourable gentleman is right that Hawk is due to be out of service in the early 2030s. We are taking steps to consider alternatives and what they might be. But as yet, there are, of course, we will, of course, consider any UK options that exist. And so, but I can't tell him what the answer to that is yet, but it is under active consideration.
Hazelgrove.
Mr. Speaker, and those who bravely serve in our forces should never lose their say in our country's future. So may I welcome the government's swift action to introduce the fact that veterans' ID cards can now be used as voter ID. And may I ask the Minister what plans there are to ensure that veterans around the country are aware of this important change?
So the Veterans ID card has been a fantastic initiative and has now been rolled out across most veterans. We have a lot of applications, thousands of applications a week, and we'll continue to endeavour to make sure they get delivered in the most timely and effective manner. Anybody who's interested in any government, any veterans' welfare issues or services that can be available, please go on the gov.uk website, type in veteran support, and there'll be a plethora of different avenues to unlock that for you.
George Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mid-Norfolk is a proud rural and military constituency with many employees working at RF Morham and Swanton Morley Barracks, home to the Queen's Dragoon Guards, and many cadets and veterans. May I ask, a few years ago we managed to secure the extension of Swanton Morley Barracks, which had been scheduled for closure. Does the welcome defence surge mean that that closure, slated for 2031, might now be reviewed?
The honourable gentleman, I can't give him an answer to that right now, but I'm certainly happy to look into it and either meet with him if he wants a meeting or write to him.
Crichton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many colleagues, I have a number of nuclear veterans in my Hill and Near constituency. Can I ask ministers what steps are taken to meet with veterans, to acknowledge their service and to deal with the consequences of their service and their exposure to nuclear materials?
So I've met with nuclear test veterans from two of the main charities, and will continue to do so on a regular basis to ensure there's a continuity of engagement. There's two things we've promised to do. One is a full and thorough review into the records, not a stovepipe loop, but a whole review. That will take a bit of time, but we're going to do that in a thorough manner. And the second one is consistent engagement to ensure people are informed of our progress.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, President Macron has blocked British firms from the new EU Defence Fund. What are the Minister's views on this act of solidarity?
It's just not accurate. There's a new proposal for a strategy from the European Union. It has opportunities for third countries like the UK to participate. The discussions that we're having demonstrate the importance of the UK being able to collaborate industrially and as governments in order to meet the threats that we face.
Jim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that when we discuss procurement and British-made weapons, that we also need to consider our responsibilities and our legal duties in terms of issuing of arms licences, and can the Minister agree with me that now is the time to talk about ending all arms sales to Israel?
Mr. Speaker, we keep all of our arms exports constantly under review. The situation is that we've made the decisions on a limited number of exports in relation to Israel. That position of keeping things under review continues, but we've got no plans at this stage to make any change.
Mr. Speaker, Staff Sergeant Peter Clough died in February 2016 with an in-service designation to that death. His widow, Kirsty, and his children, Meredith and Heather, were in the benefit of the Armed Forces Pension Scheme and remain so. However, the Armed Forces Pension Scheme made a miscalculation and have now sent debt collectors to them to try and recover a fairly small sum. I've asked about this 3 months ago and have not had a response from the department. Would the Secretary of State or one of his ministers meet with me to discuss this unedifying advert for the Ministry of Defence?
That's a truly harrowing story. I will absolutely take that on, and we'll meet straight after this and get it solved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent report, A Dark Shadow, shone a light on the link between sexual assault and suicidal ideation in the military community. I was therefore really pleased to see the announcement from the MOD last week around the removal of sexual harassment investigations from the chain of command, something which campaigners and survivors have been campaigning for such a long time. But they're also keen for reassurance. So could the Minister confirm that this is not a continuation of the failed efforts of the previous government, but a step change in making it truly independent?
This is absolutely a step change. That tri-service complaint system that has been removed out of the single services has been called for a long time. We've taken decisive action to do it, and it will move in the right direction. Combine that with the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force, and we're actually double tapping to ensure that we've got the best support for women and indeed anyone else in the armed forces.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Concerns have been growing over China's aggression in the Indo-Pacific region. Given the strategic importance of the Taiwan Strait to global security, what has the Department's response been to these rising tensions?
Well, I'm grateful for his question. We're certainly of the view that any difficulties in the Taiwan Strait should be resolved diplomatically without the use of force or coercion. The United Kingdom will be deploying our carrier strike group to the Indo-Pacific later this year as a projection of our responsibility to the region, but also making clear that, difficulties are best resolved diplomatically.
Nathan Davis.
Speaker, on Friday I was pleased to join colleagues from across the House to hear the Royal Marines Band service in concert as part of the Mountbatten Festival of Music. Can I invite the Government to reaffirm its commitment to the Royal Marines Band service because they provide a huge contribution to defence diplomacy as well as combat operations?
Thank you. Great question. I'd like to say that the Royal Marine Band Service are the best band service in our armed forces, and they're absolutely safe under our watch. They provide both a fantastic influence opportunity, but also they provide essential military services outside of their musical profession.
David Davis.
When the Defence Secretary answered the Shadow Secretary of State, he should know that this whole House supports the actions of the government to preserve peace in the Ukraine. But that was not the point he was making. He was asking whether the Ministry of Defence recognises it has a duty of care to soldiers who fight for their country and then face decades of lawfare, misusing the European Convention on Human Rights. Will the department do something to protect those soldiers?
I say to the right honourable gentleman, we are totally committed to the duty of care we have, totally committed to standing by our forces, and we recognise that there was also legislation that the last government put in place to deal with any concerns in this place, the Overseas Operations Act.
Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Drug-resistant infections have been rising in Ukraine and are a major challenge in treating wounded soldiers and getting them back to the front line. And we've also seen how these infections have spread outside Ukraine and into Europe. In the context of conflict, what steps is the Minister and their department taking to ensure antimicrobial resistance is appropriately considered in the National Security Strategy?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. It is really important that we meet the threats we're facing that aren't just state actors, but a whole range of issues. I'll be very happy meeting with her to discuss her interest in this topic further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon I was contacted by the father of Theodore, who lives in Greyshot in my constituency. Theodore wants to go to the Army Foundation College in Harrogate in September, but Capita has not sent the request to his local surgery to get his medical record. Will the Minister in general look at how Capita is performing, but more especially make sure that Theodore can attend the Foundation College in September?
Well, can I commend Theodore for his interest in attending Harrogate? Very happy if he were to write to me, and I'll happy look into it. As he will know, Capita are not continuing with the armed forces, with the army recruitment work. They've been replaced with a new tri-service offer that will come online in 2027.
That completes questions. Will that front bench change over? Right, we now come to the statement from the Secretary of State for Transport, Heidi Alexander.
Mr Speaker, with permission, I wish to make a statement regarding the power outage caused by a substation fire that impacted Heathrow Airport operations on Friday the 21st of March. I would like to begin by acknowledging the disruption to everyone affected by this incident. Many homes, schools and businesses temporarily lost power. Some families had to evacuate their homes, and many thousands have had their travel plans impacted. I also want to thank the firefighters and emergency responders who worked in very difficult conditions to put the fire out, as well as Heathrow, the National Grid, and all other public services involved who worked so hard to get power back on and people back travelling again. This was an unprecedented event, and we must learn any and all lessons we can to ensure that it does not reoccur in future. Let me begin by setting out what we currently know about the cause of the incident. A large fire broke out at North Hyde substation at 11:30 p.m. on Thursday the 20th of March and was brought under control the following day. Due to the impacts, Heathrow Airport announced at 4:30 a.m. on Friday that it would close until midnight that day. Power was restored to domestic customers in a matter of hours after the operator of the local distribution network, SSEN, redistributed power through other parts of the network. By comparison, Heathrow is one of the country's biggest consumers of electricity. It requires as much power as a small city. What we know is that there was an unprecedented outage and that it wasn't the result of a single point of failure on the electricity transmission or distribution system. The feed from North Hyde substation is one of 3 supply points to Heathrow, and the fire caused exceptional damage that took the whole substation out of service. The other supply points continued supplying to Heathrow Airport throughout the incident. Heathrow's view was that this supply was insufficient to ensure the safe and secure ongoing operation of all systems across the whole airport. It proceeded to reconfigure its internal electricity network to enable the resumption of full operations utilising the 2 other external supply points. This required hundreds of systems to be safely powered down and then safely powered up with extensive testing. The airport has a range of backup generators and uninterruptible power supplies, including diesel generators, to provide power to essential systems to enable them to safely land planes. These backup systems ensured safety and security systems and protocols were maintained at all times, but they were never designed to support full operation of the whole airport. By 12:30 on Friday afternoon, Heathrow began restarting systems to ensure they were safely operating. By 4 p.m, the airport was 100% confident that all systems were safely operating across the whole network and announced that some flights would be able to restart that day. The first flights from about 6 p.m. were so-called positioning flights, which were to get aircraft and crew to the right places to resume normal operations the following day. This was then followed by flights diverted to UK and non-UK airports to allow passengers to be repatriated and a small number of outbound long-haul flights. Mr Speaker, since Saturday, Heathrow has been fully operational with over 250,000 passengers able to fly to and from the airport on Saturday. Due to knock-on impacts of the event, there continued to be some delays and cancellations over the weekend. Overall, the impact of Heathrow's closure led to over 1,300 flights and more than 200,000 passengers having their flights cancelled or diverted on Friday and a further 110 cancelled on Saturday. The government is acutely aware of the need to ensure that passengers are well looked after and their consumer rights are protected. This is why UK law ensures that airlines must provide passengers with a refund within 7 days or to be rerouted to their destination under the same conditions. We are closely monitoring to ensure that passengers are properly supported. To support the recovery, my department temporarily lifted restrictions on overnight flights to ease congestion. Heathrow and airlines also added extra capacity into the system to help affected passengers. We also allowed rail tickets to be used flexibly to help passengers who were not able to use their original tickets. Mr. Speaker, regarding the cause of the fire, the Metropolitan Police confirmed that the fire is not believed to be suspicious. However, due to the location of the substation and the impact this incident has had on critical national infrastructure, the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command are leading our inquiries into this matter. This is due to the specialist resource and capabilities within that command, which can assist in progressing this investigation at pace to help minimise disruption and identify the cause. It would not be appropriate to comment further whilst these investigations continue, but we will of course update the House once it is appropriate to do so. Mr. Speaker, whilst it is positive that electricity supplies were restored quickly, there will of course be learnings to ensure we avoid such incidents from reoccurring. That is why on Saturday, my right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary, working with Ofgem, commissioned the independent National Energy Systems Operator, NESO, to urgently investigate this incident. The review will also seek to understand any wider lessons to be learned for energy resilience for critical national infrastructure. NESO have been asked to report back to DESNZ with initial findings within 6 weeks. In addition, Heathrow has asked Ruth Kelly, former Secretary of State for Transport and an independent member of Heathrow's board, to undertake a review of its internal resilience. The Kelly review will analyse the robustness and execution of Heathrow's crisis management plans, the airport's response and how it recovered the operation. While colleagues across the House will appreciate that we do not yet know everything there is to know about this incident, I will try to answer questions from honourable members with as much detail as possible based on the latest information I have at my disposal. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State, Gareth Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the Secretary of State for her statement and for advance sight of it. I would also like to join her in extending my gratitude to the firefighters who responded so swiftly to this incident, and I would like to extend my sympathies to everybody affected by the disruption and to place on record my thanks to all those at Heathrow who worked diligently to ensure that the airport came back online over the weekend. Mr. Speaker, the loss of power in the Heathrow area caused significant disruption for thousands of travellers and countless businesses. Heathrow Airport, one of the world's busiest airports and Europe's busiest air hub, was scheduled to handle 1,351 flights on Friday, carrying up to 291,000 passengers. However, as we know, the fire at a nearby electrical substation forced planes to be diverted to other airports, with many long-haul flights returning to their points of departure. The financial cost of this shutdown to the airline industry is expected to be to total tens of millions of pounds, with significant question marks over the airport's possible vulnerability to further disruption in the future. Before we discuss the specifics of the incident, I would like to ask the Secretary of State to confirm that she will remain engaged with Heathrow, the airlines and other key stakeholders throughout this period to minimise the impact on passengers and the economy. Turning to the government's response, I note that the Secretary of State for Energy, who I'm pleased to see in his place this afternoon, has instructed the National Energy Systems Operator to urgently investigate this incident. It is crucial that NESO's investigation delivers a clear and objective assessment of the incident's circumstances and the UK's broader energy resilience. So I would ask that the government keep the House informed as this investigation develops. I also note that the Secretary of State for Transport will be closely monitoring Heathrow's internal investigation into this incident. She is right to do so. While I trust that she will share any conclusions drawn from the report with the House, I would ask her today to provide the specific assurance that she will indeed do so. Focusing on the details of this incident, it is evident that it raises significant concerns about the resilience of Heathrow Airport and in particular, and critical infrastructure in general. Regarding Heathrow's resilience, important questions are raised about why the airport was dependent on a single electrical substation that proved so vulnerable to an incident of this nature. I understand from media reports and from the Secretary of State's statement this afternoon that whilst 2 additional substations are capable of powering the airport, doing so would require reconfiguring the power supply structure for all terminals. So I must ask, does the Secretary of State believe that this setup is appropriate for the country's largest airport? Additionally, what assessment has she made regarding the power supply resilience of other major UK airports? With regard to the resilience of our critical national infrastructure, this episode underlines the urgent need to ensure that our critical infrastructure is safeguarded against both accidental incidents and deliberate acts of sabotage by malign actors. The House will recall that when President Putin launched his illegal invasion of Ukraine, global energy markets faced immense disruption, posing the most significant threat to European energy security since the 1970s. Despite this upheaval, Britain's energy prices remained broadly stable, but only because the government of the day took decisive action to protect businesses and households from price spikes as far as possible, but this came at a significant financial cost. However, this event at Heathrow reminds us that true energy security depends not only on price stability, but also on the physical safety of our energy infrastructure. Given the crucial role of airports to our economy, we must remain vigilant. And in light of that, I must ask the Secretary of State what discussions she has had with her right honourable friend, the Energy Secretary, to ensure the energy supply to major airports remains secure. What is the timeline for the Kelly review, and will its findings be made publicly available? Will she engage with colleagues across government departments to assess and mitigate the risks posed by malicious actors who will undoubtedly have taken note of this weekend's events? And finally, Mr. Speaker, what specific steps will she take to strengthen the resilience of our critical national infrastructure?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for the tone of his comments, and let me assure him and other members of this House that I will do everything I can to keep him updated, and I will continue the engagement that I have had with Heathrow since the incident first became known to me. I spoke to the Chief Executive of Heathrow on Friday morning. I spoke again to the Chief Executive of Heathrow today, and if there is anything that my officials can do to assist his front bench in understanding this very serious issue, I would be very willing to facilitate any meetings that he may wish to have. With regard to the internal investigation that London Heathrow Board have commissioned Ruth Kelly to do, as he knows, I have asked to see a copy of that report, and assuming that I have the permission of Heathrow to share it more broadly, then I would be happy to share those contents with him and the House. He asked me about whether I am content and confident with the setup for airport power supplies. I should just say that I'm not going to become an armchair electrical engineer. I do want to see the reports that have been commissioned by the airport and that my honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Energy, has commissioned from NESO. We are also conducting via the Cabinet Office a resilience review of critical national infrastructure, and I can assure him that we will be looking at any and all of the issues that this incident raises in those reviews. I did speak with my honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Energy, on Friday evening, and I also assure him that I will continue to engage across government on any of the issues that this incident raises.
Ruth Cabret.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to also thank the Transport Secretary for her statement today, and also the fire services and the airport and airline staff who did so much to over the weekend to address and support the situation and ensure it didn't get any worse. And also, I can say that we will have a committee session next week with the Chief Exec of Heathrow Airport and others, and we'll look forward to also asking the Secretary of State more questions when she comes to us after the Easter recess, by which time I hope that both she and I will be better genned up on electrical engineering.
Mr. Speaker, there has been talk this weekend about the single point of failure, and in this case I don't just mean a particular electricity substation, but that our busiest airport and what happens when it closes, the impact that all of our airports have when they are at risk. They are critical national infrastructure. And I'm told that the next airport's national policy statement will, like the last one, only cover Heathrow. So would the Secretary of State consider that now is definitely the time that we had a national airport strategy so that includes what happens when any one of our airports is taken out of action?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the chairwoman of the Select Committee, for her remarks. The airport's national policy statement is a site-specific document, but I will reflect upon her suggestion of a wider airport strategy, and I'm sure we will discuss it more when I'm in front of her committee in a couple of weeks' time.
Paul Calder, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement? May I start by echoing the words of the Secretary of State and others in expressing my gratitude to the firefighters and other emergency workers who fought the fire, and for the airport, airline and other staff for all their hard work in the face of this catastrophic systems failure. What has happened is clearly a rare occurrence. It raises a number of significant questions about the security management of our critical national infrastructure. Whilst I'm pleased to hear that currently no foul play is suspected, the event has revealed vulnerabilities in our national security that may be exploited in the future by terrorists and hostile state actors. It is consequently vital that lessons are learnt to ensure an incident like this does not happen again, and I welcome the announcement there will be a full investigation into what has happened. It's deeply concerning that the failure of a single piece of infrastructure has taken down the entire airport. Heathrow is connected to 3 substations. Whilst 2 were impacted, the third was running and had enough capacity, thought to be around 72 megawatts, to power the whole of Heathrow, which requires a little more than 40. It is evident Heathrow's power setup could not be swiftly reconfigured to allow the third substation to be used, and we need to understand why and whether this can be remedied for the future. Whilst Heathrow claims it is normal for airports not to have sufficient backup capacity to power their entire needs, other industries that require even more power than Heathrow, such as data centres, take more robust steps to ensure there are sufficient backup systems to counter such failures. Shouldn't our key international transport hub have the same safeguards? We must also not forget those whose journeys were disrupted. It's estimated that over 200,000 passengers have been impacted by the event. However, under current regulations, most of these will not be eligible for compensation. So can I ask the Secretary of State 3 questions? 1. What impact, if any, will this incident have on the government's plans for expansion at Heathrow? Can the national grid infrastructure cope with the third runway, or will the airport become more prone to failure? Secondly, does she believe that UK airports should be taking steps to increase their backup capacity to ensure an incident like this does not happen again? And thirdly, does she believe the current regulations concerning passenger compensation are sufficient?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. I do think the question of expansion of Heathrow and this very rare, unprecedented event are 2 entirely separate issues, and he will be aware that the government has invited Heathrow to bring forward proposals for a third runway. We will be reviewing the airport's national policy statement after that. With regard to backup capacity at airports, I am told that the backup power systems in Heathrow operated as they should have done in this incident. They did not fail. I don't want to make knee-jerk conclusions as a result of this unprecedented incident, but we will be looking very closely at the 2 reviews I mentioned in my statement, and I have worked with the Civil Aviation Authority to ensure that passengers who have been affected by this disruption are aware of their rights.
MacDonald.
Heathrow is in my constituency, as is this substation which caught fire, so I'd like to join with the others to thank the firefighters who worked so hard to get this under control so quickly at some risk. Also the police and the council officers that helped the evacuation of 150 of my constituents from their homes. I was there on the day, met some of the residents, and I'll be writing to them all so that we could pick up lessons from what they experienced on the day itself and build it in. But now that this site has gained such high profile, there are concerns about the security of the site for the future. So I'd welcome some more detailed information coming out of the inquiry about how we will secure this site in the future, not just from accident, but also from potential attack.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that question, and I think he raises a fair point, and I will ensure that we provide that information to him once we have reviewed the different reports that are going to be published over the next couple of months.
Bob Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State mentions consumer rights, and Heathrow customers were not only delayed and disrupted, but also ripped off, with huge hikes for alternative flight, car hire and hotels. Isn't it time the government brought forward robust anti-price gouging legislation? And in fairness to her on the front bench, I also asked the previous government, did absolutely zero on it as well. So I hope this government will, well, it's true, and I think we saw the result of that in many other ways. So can I ask, on behalf of the British consumer, who are many of them, and international consumers, who've been ripped off as a result of this, no fault of their own, isn't it time we had this new legislation in place, and also a wider review of the monopoly of the operators of hotels in Heathrow and the lack of competition of airlines coming into Heathrow?
Secretary of State.
I can categorically say that it wouldn't be right for anyone or any business to be capitalising from this disruption. And whether it is airlines or hotels, I would be expecting those organisations to be doing everything they can to support travellers who have been disrupted by this incident.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think the Secretary of State's statement today underlines why it's important to avoid speculation in the immediate aftermath of the critical incidents such as this. Can she give the House a reassurance that if any systematic risks are identified that potentially affect other major airports, then there will be a coordinated response? And if any such issues are identified at regional and local airports, then members of this House in proximity to those airports will be kept informed.
Secretary of State.
I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State very much for her answers. Of course, this isn't the first time. Of course, there's been a problem at Heathrow back in August 23, UK air traffic problems. The place was closed, chaos. July 24, faulty software causes chaos again. We're always hoping that Heathrow was getting better. Last Friday, in the air this morning, I was one of those passengers, by the way, along with 290,000 other passengers that found themselves stuck in somewhere in the queue. Now, many of those people are my constituents, and they had trouble getting home as well. They've been contacting me right over the weekend to tell me their stories. This raises questions over whether the current operators are capable of running a third runway if this fire caused a complete shutdown, when reports indicate that complete closure was not required. Confidence in travelling from my constituents and others in Heathrow is at an all-time low. So has the Secretary of State made Heathrow officials aware of the need to ensure that contingency plans are not simply notes on paper, but are actions during a crisis? And what has been their response to allayed fears caused by the turmoil of last weekend? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
I don't think anyone underestimates the distress and disruption that this incident caused, and having spoken directly with the Chief Executive of Heathrow on a number of occasions now, I know that he is fully aware of that. I do think that this is an unprecedented event of very significant magnitude. Heathrow does, day in, day out, very successfully provide services to hundreds of thousands of passengers and businesses. So whilst it's right that we do everything we can to interrogate the causes of this incident and learn any lessons, I do believe that Heathrow Airport can continue to be a trusted partner for government in the longer term.
Bill Esterson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The power outage, which had such a significant effect at Heathrow and its immediate surrounds, has raised real concerns about resilience and the backup of our energy system for infrastructure, major infrastructure projects and sites. The government has plans for significant expansion of our clean energy, electricity networks. So can the Secretary of State say to what extent the government will build into its clean power plans the greater resilience and backup that this very worrying example at Heathrow has emphasised is so badly needed?
Secretary of State.
I can confidently say that as we transition to clean power, resilience will remain key in the delivery of our power network, and I don't think that anything changes as a result of our determination to move to clean power, but that, I'm happy to continue discussions with colleagues in DESNES to make sure that that is the case.
Father House, Robert Lee.
Following that last question, can the Secretary of State give us an absolute assurance that nothing in our drive towards green energy and net zero will ever affect the sustainability and safety of our vital transport systems?
I can give the honourable gentleman that assurance, and I am very aware that there were some other honourable members of this House who aren't present in the chamber today who were busy peddling some myths on Friday morning about this issue. It was very clear to me that the backup power supplies that Heathrow have consist of both diesel and electricity generators. So no matter what some other honourable members might be saying, those systems did work, and I can give the honourable gentleman the assurance that he seeks.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. The fires at electricity substations are not unheard of. And it seems that there's been a considerable amount of lack of preparedness, perhaps, at Heathrow. So when she receives her reviews, will she be looking into what preparedness did Heathrow have? What scenarios did they go through for possible outages like this in order to get their operations back up running as quickly as possible?
So said.
I think that will be an issue that the Kelly review is looking at, and I think the honourable gentleman makes a fair point about preparedness as well as resilience, and it will be a subject that I will be discussing in the future with Heathrow.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The level of disruption caused by the fire and the subsequent closure of Heathrow Airport highlights the importance of reliable aviation connectivity to our daily lives, as well as the fragility of much of our UK infrastructure. The National Infrastructure Commission published reports in 2020, 2023 and again in 2024 that called for the government to implement standards and frameworks for resilience for key sectors such as telecoms, water, transport and energy. Does the Minister agree that this incident shows how important these standards would be, and will the appropriate department pick up the reports that I'm sure have found their way onto their desks over the weekend and start to implement their recommendations?
State.
I think we're actually already doing it, because the review that was announced by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster last July into resilience is looking at resilience in the context of our critical national infrastructure.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rarely disagree with my honourable friend, but I'm not sure that this major incident can be entirely divorced from Heathrow's plans for a third runway. It's precisely because it is up against densely populated communities that we had such devastating effects, with tens of thousands of people losing power, hundreds of people being evacuated, part of the M4 closed in that way. Would she at least say that in any consideration of expansion of Heathrow, 50% larger, therefore problems like this presumably 50% worse, she would at least look at the risk and resilience that will be consequences of that?
Thursday.
I don't think it necessarily follows that an expanded Heathrow that took twice as many flights as it does currently necessarily means that the likelihood of an incident such as that we saw on Friday is any higher. This was an unprecedented fire of a very significant scale. What I will assure my honourable friend of, though, is that before making any decisions about the expansion of Heathrow, we will make sure that any proposals which may be forthcoming comply with all of our legislative requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State mentioned that many families were evacuated from their properties. Clearly, safety is of paramount importance. Only a few days ago, Nat Power UK informed me that they want to build an enormous electrical substation in my constituency. Once NESO has reported on this matter, would the Secretary of State please help organise a meeting with the relevant Energy Minister so that we can discuss the findings of NESO and link that with any proposal for a new substation in my constituency?
Tenuous link.
I think the relevant Energy Minister is actually sat next to me and was nodding his head, which suggests to me that he would be happy to have such a meeting.
Matt Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and the way that she's approached this very serious issue. Heathrow is clearly a vital piece of national infrastructure. It's also very important and is central to the economy of West London and the Thames Valley, and plays a very important part in attracting inward investment into our region. Could I ask the Secretary of State, as she works with the authors of these two reviews, to also liaise with the local business community and with local authorities in the Thames Valley, and to make sure they're fully kept abreast of the work that's carried out in the reviews?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend makes a very fair point, and I'm very happy to give him that undertaking.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Speaker. Could I urge the Secretary of State again not to divorce the question of expansion from what has happened here, because surely what this incident shows us that crippled Europe's busiest airport, that what we need is a better Heathrow, not a bigger Heathrow, i.e. we need to focus on the infrastructure in and around Heathrow to improve resilience, to improve security, to improve the passenger experience, and that actually a further third runway, it may not increase the likelihood of such an incident, but actually the impact of such an incident will be all the greater if she continues to put all our aviation eggs in one basket.
Let me assure the honourable lady that I am not putting all of the country's aviation eggs in one basket. At the moment, we don't have proposals before us for a third runway at Heathrow. We will look at those proposals carefully when they are submitted, and we will make sure that any decisions that are taken about either the airport's national policy statement or a decision on any subsequent development consent order are taken in line with our environmental obligations in relation to things such as carbon, air pollution, noise, and consideration of the resilience of the infrastructure will be part of that.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. A national embarrassment, laughing stock globally, shocking. These, with memes doing the rounds, these are just some of the words which could be used to describe this weekend's events at Heathrow. While Right Honourable members in our Defence Committee and the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy are busy discussing hybrid and cyber threats from our adversaries, our nation's biggest port was taken down by a single substation fire. Does my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, agree with me that my Slough constituents and people across the country aren't bothered with the blame game that is now underway, but that this should be a wake-up call regarding the resilience of our national infrastructure and that there should be no repeat?
Mr. Speaker, this was an unprecedented event, and Heathrow stood up their resilience plans swiftly, and within 18 hours of that fire starting, planes were once again landing at the airport. For an airport the size of Heathrow, that is no mean feat. It's right that both an internal review of the airport crisis management and resilience plans takes place, and it's right that the government has commissioned the review that will be conducted by NESO.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has already indicated that she spoke to the Chief Executive of Heathrow on Friday and again this morning. I'd like to think in an instant of this scale that there was ministerial contact throughout the weekend and possibly on a more than daily basis, given the impact it had on so many people. Will she commit to urgently reviewing the DFT's response to this major incident in addition to Heathrow's response? The Secretary of State will also be very much aware that there are airports length and breadth of the UK that are vital transport hubs linked to critical infrastructure such as Aberdeen Airport and my own constituency Inverness, with dozens of helicopter flights servicing offshore oil and gas and renewables infrastructure and airports that are home to air ambulances, police helicopters and Coast Guard services. Will she also therefore commit to reviewing the level of operational resilience in those and other locations that host services critical to people's well-being and energy security and national security?
Secretary of State.
I can assure the honourable gentleman that in addition to the conversations I had with the Chief Executive of Heathrow, I was updated throughout the weekend by my officials on what was happening at the airport, and I'm happy to write to him about the wider point that he raises.
James Sasson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Secretary of State is aware, my constituency contains London City Airport, which by its nature is very closely situated alongside residential and business buildings, and so safety is something we're very alive to. It's also an area of massive regeneration, so power pressure is something we're also alive to as well, and that will be an interesting part for my constituents as part of her statement. Could she assure us that the review and the lessons learned will not only be shared, but also be looked at how they can be adapted so other airports can adjust to them and make future-proofing for their resilience in the safer, so that we're not just learning this lesson after the event?
Secretary of State.
I'm very happy to make that commitment to my honourable friend.
Dr. Andrew Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree that what happened on Thursday and Friday is a complete national embarrassment? It should never have happened. Will she do an assessment of our remaining airports to ensure that they also have multiple supply points for electricity, but that they do not rely on the illusion that plainly happened at Heathrow, that those multiple supply points made Heathrow completely reliable as a hub airport? Because that appears, on first looking at this, to be the case as far as Heathrow is concerned, and it's not adequate.
Secretary of State.
It strikes me that the honourable member wasn't perhaps listening to the responses I gave in answer to questions on this side of the chamber. Whilst there were multiple power supply points to Heathrow, Heathrow took the decision that they needed to reconfigure the supply in the airport. Terminals 2 and 4 were very badly affected. They decided to put the safety and security of the travelling public first. They powered down all of those systems and they powered them back up again. Now, I wasn't sat in the room when those decisions were taken. Heathrow is a private company and they took decisions about what they thought was best for the travelling public. I'm not going to second guess those as the Transport Secretary, but what I will make sure is that we do very thorough reviews and I interrogate those reviews very carefully to ensure that any lessons we need to learn are learnt and are actioned upon.
Emma Foodie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her update to the House this morning. As well as being one of the busiest airports in the world in its own right, Heathrow, of course, is a crucial hub, meaning that connector airports such as Newcastle International Airport and others are really impacted by any issues at Heathrow. Can my right honourable friend please assure me that a proper investigation is taking place, and not only is it taking place, but that we will learn the lessons and make sure that no such issue happens going forward, and to keep the House updated in the meantime?
Secretary of State.
I recognise that Heathrow provides really important connectivity for our regional airports and therefore for some of her constituents as well. I can give her an assurance that I will keep the House updated once both the internal review that has been commissioned by Heathrow comes back and once the report by NISO has also been published.
David Munn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, this event was on a catastrophic scale, but there is regular disruption at Heathrow, and one of the consequences of that is wholesale cancellation of flights between Heathrow and Scotland, which I have raised previously in this chamber. So when Ruth Kelly does her report into Heathrow's resilience, will she look at its wider resilience, its ability to cope with weather-related or other technical issues, and not lead to this wholesale cancellation of flights between Scotland and London?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for that question. I am not writing the terms of reference of the Kelly review because that is a review that has been commissioned by Heathrow Airport itself, and so I hesitate to stand at the dispatch box and try to amend the terms of a private company's review. My honourable friend, the Aviation Minister, tells me that you have written to him about this issue. He is due to be coming back to you on it, and it is a matter that is being considered by the Aviation Futures Forum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement here today. And can I add the comments that other members have made, and thanking those who dealt with this terrible incident at the time. This obviously had a huge impact on passengers, including residents in Harlow, who were looking to get back to the US. Can I ask what reassurance she can give passengers that this was due to an unprecedented power outage? And I wonder if this adds the case that other airports like Stansted, which employs a number of residents in my constituency, should have a greater resilience, a greater capacity, and potentially even look at transatlantic flights.
He's tempting me to make a whole series of comments, interesting comments about Stansted. I can assure him that when we get the reviews back, we will be looking at the implications of those reviews with respect to other airports, including Stansted, which provides employment for a number of his constituents.
Speaker, the fire and Heathrow closure will not only have impacted travellers and goods and services, but also the employees and contractors who work at Heathrow. So what can the Secretary of State reassure me and workers? Could she reassure me that she will urge all employers at Heathrow to ensure that staff who are due to work but unable to work for no fault of their own will be paid for that day?
I'm grateful for that question. I must admit it's not a subject that I have discussed to date with the Chief Executive of Heathrow, but I'm happy to follow that issue up for him and come back to him.
Rachel Tell.
Can I thank the Secretary of State for all her hard work on this matter over the weekend? And can she reassure my constituents in North Warwickshire and Bedworth that our energy resilience remains high and that the holidays they have saved long and hard for will not be disrupted by similar incidents at regional airports up and down the country? And will she also look into the particular impact that outages like this have on disabled passengers?
I will look at the specific issues that she raises about disabled passengers, but I would like to reassure her and her constituents that I am confident that our airports and critical national infrastructure is resilient. I do recognise that significant disruption was caused on this occasion. The NESO review will tell us if there are any other actions that we need to take, but I am confident in our current arrangements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's first really important to emphasise that energy infrastructure is generally safe, but the example on Friday indicated that things can go wrong. What is the Minister, alongside her governmental colleagues, doing to address over-industrialisation in certain areas? An example in my constituency of Kintore and Ley Lodge, we have a 275 kV substation next to a 400 kV with a 3 gigawatt hydrogen plant and 9 battery storage sites in planning. This together has a huge risk if we consider that a fire was able to start on Friday.
I think all of these risks are considered in the round, but if she wanted to write to an appropriate minister in another government department and copy me into that, I would be happy to follow up on those discussions.
Mr. Speaker, following the incident at Heathrow, will the Secretary of State commit to investing in regional airports such as Blackpool Airport to diversify our air travel options, support local economies like mine in Blackpool South, and therefore reducing our reliance on major hubs?
Mr. Speaker, I'm really very sorry. I didn't quite catch the question that was asked. If the honourable gentleman would like to write to me, I will ensure I come back to him.
Sir Jeremy Wright.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has perfectly fairly said that some of the specific learning about this incident will have to wait until we know more. But she's also said that she's been told that as a matter of design, the backup power arrangements for Heathrow were not intended to cover all airport operations until, as we know, a significant reconfiguration took place over a matter of hours. Can I ask her to assure us that she can and will begin the work of considering whether that is the right position, not just for Heathrow but for other airports? I make no predetermination on her behalf as to whether it is or it isn't, but she can surely do that now without waiting for the specifics of this incident all to be clear.
Heathrow is a private company and it is responsible for developing its own resilience plans. I do think this is an issue that will be considered properly by the Kelly review. But he is right that I have been told that the backup power systems were not designed to provide power for the entire airport. When I discussed this matter with the Chief Executive of Heathrow on Friday, he told me that that is quite typical for an airport the size of Heathrow, but I am sure it is an issue that the Kelly review will be looking at.
Yeah. Lynn Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and also associate myself with her comments of gratitude towards our firefighters and airport staff who responded to the incident. Can my right honourable friend confirm that passengers have sufficient rights to receive support and compensation where these kinds of external events disrupt their plans? Thank you.
Airlines are responsible for providing passengers with a refund within 7 days or to be rerouted to their destination under the same conditions with required suitable accommodation and food. So it is airlines' responsibilities. We've advertised the rights of passengers via the CAA in recent days to make sure that people are aware, but those are the provisions that exist within our law to compensate people that have been affected by this type of disruption.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In any modern economy, it's quite clear that resilience of national critical infrastructure faces many risks and threats, and that resilience goes hand in hand with our national security. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this incident and other risks that we face demonstrate that the role of the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor should be bolstered to more prominently cover national security and critical infrastructure resilience?
Secretary of State.
I can assure the honourable gentleman that this government will be doing everything in its power to learn the lessons from this incident and make sure that our critical national infrastructure is protected and resilient as we move forward.
Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Secretary of State's statement says that the National Energy System Operator, the review will seek to understand wider lessons to be learned for energy resilience for critical national infrastructure. Can I ask the Secretary of State, will that review include Northern Ireland in regards to the infrastructure there, but also include Belfast International Airport in my constituency, but also the Belfast City Airport as well?
Secretary of State.
My understanding is that the grid is separate in Northern Ireland. I will take his question away and consider with colleagues about the appropriate geographical scope of the NESO review. The terms of reference haven't yet been finally determined, so I will come back to him on that issue.
Right, that completes the statement.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order,
Mr Speaker, on Saturday the 22nd of March, 11 Labour MPs campaigned in my constituency, the majority of whom neglected to inform me. Now, I'm well aware that the party opposite is desperate to hang on to the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough mayoralty, having parted company with the current Labour mayor at the 11th hour after he was found guilty of breaching the Code of Conduct during his term, but having panic-selected the only candidate they could find at short notice, who already lost the Police and Crime Commissioner election last year, they are desperately pouring MPs into my constituency to campaign against Paul Bristow. As a matter of courtesy, I would expect members to notify me of their visit, and whilst new members could feign ignorance, a Secretary of State and a junior minister should know better.
Can I first of all say, all MPs should notify other members when coming in. Sorry? I do say, I will stamp down, where members aren't given that courtesy, please do so. Yes, election fever will be coming, but it is no excuse for members not informing other members that they're coming into campaign. And what I would say is, I don't know who the Minister and Secretary of State is, but it absolutely gives them no right without notifying, and they should know better. I say to all sides, please use the courtesy of the House that you inform other members. Thank you.
The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Planning and Infrastructure Bill, second reading.
No. The reasoned amendment in the name of Gideon Amos has not been selected. Minister to move the second reading. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this bill be read a second time. It's time to get Britain building again. This is what working people expect of this government, and it's what we will deliver. Our planning and infrastructure bill is critical to achieving economic growth, higher living standards and more secure future for our country. This is our plan for change in action. Action to build 1.5 million homes in this Parliament and a fast track of 150 major infrastructure projects, more than were decided over the 14 years under the last government. It's also key to making Britain a clean energy superpower, bringing down bills for working people and securing our energy supply in a more uncertain world. Make no mistake, this bill will transform the lives of working people and Britain's prospects for years to come. It is hugely ambitious, Madam Deputy Speaker, and rightly so, because everywhere I go, I hear the same frustrations. We just can't build anything anymore. We desperately need more homes and more development. But for too long, the answer has always been no. And that is choking off growth, leaving working people worse off and leaving Britain behind. Trains that don't work, roads that are clogged and not enough homes being built. I'll give way.
Can I just gently say to her that none of my constituents are saying in Shropshire we don't need any more homes, we don't want any more homes. They just want to be consulted. They want the homes in the right place, at the right scale, with the right architecture, in the right numbers, and they want their voice listened to through a local plan, not ignored, as the current government are doing.
Secretary of State.
Well, I gently say to the honourable member, it's this government that has brought forward mandatory local plans. It was his government that didn't do that. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long, we've left home ownership collapsing, homelessness soaring, over 160,000 children in temporary accommodation, a country that simply isn't working. The time it takes to secure planning permission for major projects has almost doubled in the last decade, more than 4 years. It's slower and more costly to build big infrastructure in England than in France and Italy. And no new reservoir has been built for over 30 years. There are countless examples, Madam Deputy Speaker, like the critical new road improvement scheme for Norwich that would create jobs and speed up journeys, yet it was held up for 2 years by unsuccessful legal challenges. And the ridiculous situation where 139 desperately needed houses were delayed in Bingley because of a row over the speed of balls in neighbouring cricket club. The result has been fewer homes built, higher energy bills and lower productivity and growth. For 14 years, this country has been crying out for a government with the will to change that. And successive Tory Prime Ministers promised that change, but when the bold action was demanded, they were too afraid to stand up to their backbenchers, and I'll give way.
Thank the Deputy Prime Minister for giving way. Could she just outline what is in the bill where she's going to take on developers and make sure they build planning permissions they've already got?
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank the honourable member, but he will know, as a member of the Select Committee, we've already made changes through the National Planning Policy Framework. We've got our New Homes Accelerator, which is already providing thousands of homes, and this bill is about building on those powers to make sure that we get Britain building. It was his government that didn't build the houses and the infrastructure that we desperately need, and they were too timid to face down the vested interests. And it's this Labour government that is on the side of the builders and not the blockers. And we say no more. I'll give way.
Jim Shannon.
Ministers, nobody doesn't welcome the 1.5 million houses. I think it's really important we see that. But part of the infrastructure is the EV charging systems. Many people I speak to who I asked about electric cars say I'm not getting one because we haven't got enough EV charging points. Clause 43 of the government's bill indicates that there will be more. Can I ask the Minister, is that something she might share with the Minister, relevant Minister in Northern Ireland, first thing? But the second thing, I understand as well that some of the standard accessibility requirements do not meet the standards. Could the Minister confirm that that will be changed as well? Thank you so much.
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and the bill will streamline the approval of street works needed for the installation of EV charge points and removing the need for licensing where works are capable to be authorised by permits, because we recognise that people do need this critical infrastructure as part of these reforms. It's why we're taking more action in 8 months than the party opposite managed in 14 years. We've reversed the damaging changes made by the Tories to the National Planning Policy Framework, and we brought Greenbelt into the 21st century, ending the de facto ban on new onshore wind, and we're supporting local authorities with an additional 300 planning officers. And just this month, we set out reforms to put growth at the heart of the statutory consultee system. Many would have said, stop there, Madam Deputy Speaker, allow the reforms to bed in. But Britain cannot afford to wait. We've been held back for too long by governments without the will to drive the change. So today, this landmark planning and infrastructure bill goes even further and faster. I'll give way.
Can I congratulate my honourable friend on championing particularly affordable and social housing and the expansion of that? Can I ask her to take account one other excluded group, which is gypsies and travellers, who've been systematically discriminated against by the Conservatives over 14 years. So there is no assessment of needs. There is no statutory duty to provide sites any longer, and they're not in the strategic planning provisions. Can we rectify that in this bill so that we have a level playing field for everybody who's in need of housing?
Secretary of State. Well, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and we're working with local authorities, and within this bill there's also provision for strategic authorities as well, so that we can look at where we have sites and make sure that people are accommodated, and it's for local authorities to be able to do that. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it starts with a quicker and more certain system for big-ticket infrastructure projects. It will slice through the bureaucracy and speed up transport projects. It will overhaul how government decisions on major infrastructure projects can be challenged, so meritless cases will only have one rather than 3 attempts at a legal challenge, stopping cases from being dragged endlessly and needlessly through the courts. I'll give way.
Roger Gale. To the Secretary of State. Somewhere in the system, knocking around, there's a government press release that says that the Sea-Link project, for example, National Grid Sea-Link project, is being obstructed by too many objections. The reason it's being objected to is because the National Grid wants to build a 90-foot high converter station the size of 5 football pitches on the Minster Marshes in Kent. We have to have the right to object to that kind of project.
Absolutely. Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I gently say there isn't a loss of right to object. And in fact, we're strengthening the processes and clarifying them as part of this bill. As I said, and I'll say it again, quicker and more certain system for big-ticket infrastructure projects. That it will slice through bureaucracy and speed up transport projects. But what it won't do is allow meritless cases to have 3 attempts at a legal challenge. And it will stop cases from being dragged endlessly and needlessly through the courts. And it begins to strip away the unnecessary consultation requirements that do nothing to improve applications nor meaningfully engage communities, but do slow down the delivery of infrastructure that will benefit communities in the future. It creates greater flexibility so projects can go through the most appropriate and faster planning route. I'll give way.
Callum Miller.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State for giving way. She will understand that when there are a number of nationally strategic infrastructure projects in one area, that has a huge impact on that area. And in my constituent, Bicester and Woodstock, we're looking at having a strategic rail interchange, a major solar plant, and the East-West Rail project. So can she give reassurance to my constituents as how their voice can be heard under this project? And can she reassure us that when these issues go to the Planning Inspectorate and to the Secretary of State, the cumulative effect of these national projects which are not present in local plans will be taken into consideration before decisions are taken?
Secretary of State.
Well, we will be consulting as part of the bill, as you know, in terms of the draft that we've put forward, but we want to see better and quality engagement as part of this. It's why our changes will ensure everyone works together early on and that we have proportionate decisions that are also faster. We will make sure that government's infrastructure policies are updated at least every 5 years, but the measures in this bill are not the limit of our ambitions.
John McDonnell.
I'm grateful for the Secretary of State giving way, and she's outlining the process by which essential infrastructure needs to be built, but she'll forgive me if I come back to referring to Heathrow and expansion. I'd be extremely grateful if you could set out for us, not today maybe, but later in the debate or in writing, the exact process that the expansion of Heathrow will be considered under these no proposals, under the new legislation. But in addition to that, explain why those who will be affected by compulsory purchase are now going to be removed as consultees at the pre-application stage.
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't get into the details of any particular process or planning, but what I will say is this planning and infrastructure bill is about better and quality engagement, and statutory consultees, of course, those will be engaged and will continue to be engaged. But what we don't want to see is major infrastructure projects continually being blocked for years and years and years. People have been speaking about some of these projects for decades, and we still haven't got the connectivity that we desperately need. But we are opening to strengthening it, and will give serious consideration to proposals that further our objectives, and will continue to engage with colleagues across the House, as well as business and communities, on what might be done about existing requirements that are not working as they should. And we are clear that where once the answer was always no, Madam Deputy Speaker, to get Britain building, to drive growth and deliver opportunity, the answer must now be yes. The bill is also geared towards another crucial pledge: building the new homes we need. We will boost house building in England by streamlining planning decisions. I'll give way.
Thank the Deputy Prime Minister for giving way, and I warmly welcome the steps being taken to streamline the system and to get more homes built, and that of course includes social and affordable housing. Would the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that this would go some way to helping the 160,000 children who are stuck in temporary accommodation?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention and for bringing it back down to why we're all here, Madam Deputy Speaker, and why we're in this mess in the first place. Over Christmas, we all got to see our family and friends. I was thinking about the 160,000 children that are in temporary accommodation, and thinking that there is one thing that during the general election campaign that I was very clear on, is that we have to move forward to build the homes that people desperately need. And behind every single one of those statistics is a family or an opportunity that is not being realised, and that is one of our missions of this government, is to strengthen that. I'll give way.
Deputy Prime Minister for giving way. By my calculation, Madam Deputy Speaker, if the government is going to build 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament, given that we're 9 months into the first year of this Parliament, the government should have built 225,000 by now. Can she confirm how many have been built?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think he's just an example of what the mess the previous government left us in. House building was going backwards. The figures they promised were nowhere near. That's why within the first 7 months, in fact within the first few months of us getting into power, Madam Deputy Speaker, we changed the National Planning Policy Framework. We've been consulting, we've been working with industry, we've had a new homes accelerator, 1,000 more put into the system, more affordable homes programme, £2 billion announced today. We will boost house building in England by streamlining planning decisions, introducing a national scheme of delegation that sets out which type of applications should be determined by officers and which by planning committee. Local democratic oversight is crucial to ensuring good development, but the right decisions must be taken at the right level to get Britain building. I'll give way.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for giving way and for the excellent speech she's given about the importance of building homes. She mentioned earlier the importance of getting young people out of temporary accommodation, something I wholly support. Would she also agree with me it's not just about temporary accommodation, it's also about families that are suffering from overcrowding, families in unsuitable accommodation and families at risk of homelessness and the anxiety that brings with? I know that's something that my inbox is full of from residents in Harlow.
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend makes a very important point, because not only has this government inherited a real dire situation in terms of house building, and that's why we're going to turn the tide and build the 1.5 million homes. But we've also seen homelessness levels rise. They promised to end Section 21 no-fault evictions, haven't done it. We're going to do it. We're going to bring in Arab's Law that will protect people in the rented sector. There is so much wrong with our housing system. This government is starting to turn the tide on that, and that's what this is, one crucial step in the overall picture that this government is taking to improve the circumstances for people, whether it's if they want to buy a home, whether they're in a home, or whether they're in private rented situation. Turning back to the planning committees, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will bring in new controls over the size of planning committees, increasing the pace and quality of decision-making while maintaining robust debate. And we're introducing mandatory training for planning committee members to improve their expertise while allowing councils to set their own planning fees to cover their costs, with a promise that this money is reinvested back into the system to help speed it up. I'll give way.
Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. I'm very grateful to the Deputy Prime Minister giving way. My colleague in the front here says she doesn't like you, but she obviously does. So I welcome a lot of what this bill is doing. It's speeding up the planning system. As a chartered surveyor who has practiced in planning, that is desperately needed if we're going to get more houses built. But the one area of the bill I have concerns about is what she's just talking about just now. If local people feel completely overridden by their planning system, they're going to feel very hard done by. Otherwise, if we override local people, we might just as well have a nationally directed planning system rather than a local planning system. Will she carefully think about that balance?
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman and recognise his expertise in this area, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I think he's absolutely right. There does have to be a balance, and that's why we're setting out in the bill where there's controversial schemes, etc., they will still go to full planning committees, but there's other areas, and I'm sure the gentleman would recognise that as well, where actually local planners would be able to do some of that work, and if we set out the rules clearly, I think we can make the process better so that where there is more need for that engagement, with this mandatory training for those that are on the planning committees as well, I actually think we'll get a better result through these changes, and I hope the honourable member will continue to engage with us in that vein. I'll give way.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the £2 billion in extra money for social homes being announced today, but also for the 150 new nationally significant infrastructure projects that will be paved the way for them by this bill. But also, more importantly, that we're the party of the builders, not the blockers, so we need more builders, and that's why the 600 million announced to have a new army of 60,000 more brickies, electricians and engineers is very, very welcome. And can I suggest that Rochdale's Hopwood Hole College, which has a brilliant record in training construction workers, is included in this project?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as my honourable friend alludes at, 10 colleges of excellence was announced as part of the 600 million and 60,000 new apprenticeships. This is part of making work pay for me as well, Madam Deputy Speaker, giving our young people opportunities, and it will be fantastic, and I hope the honourable member will be engaged in that process, and my colleagues in government will have heard that, but I think as another Greater Manchester MP, I feel that Greater Manchester definitely should be part of that process. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll give way.
Just to pick up the tone of some of the comments made there about blockers, I knock on many doors in my constituency, Sutton and Cheam, and the narrative about NIMBYs blocking housing, people not wanting homes built in their constituency, is very much untrue. People recognise the need for additional homes for themselves, their children, and those of a growing population. But what they worry about is infrastructure. This bill does not include mandatory infrastructure targets, and that's why residents are so sceptical about their ability to get GPs appointments at the moment. With additional homes and additional demand, they're going to struggle even more in future. How can we reassure them that those needs will be met in the future?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me be clear. I don't call people of this country the blockers. I don't see that when I'm out and about. I never did during the general election. People want it. And I think the honourable member makes a very important point about infrastructure as well. People often say the infrastructure isn't there. This bill streamlines infrastructure. I think it goes some way towards doing the work. It's not everything. We have to do a lot of other things like we've done with Section 106, for example, which under the previous government, often we didn't get the benefits. People wiggled out of their obligations. So I appreciate the tone of what the honourable member is saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, and this government is going to make sure we build the houses people want, where they want them, with consultation and with the critical infrastructure that they need. And at the same time, we'll unlock land for housing and infrastructure by reforming the compulsory purchase process, ensuring that important projects which deliver public benefits, like many more social and affordable homes, are given the green light, and that compensation paid to landowners is not excessive. I'll give way.
I'm very grateful to the Deputy Prime Minister for giving way. I warmly welcome the changes to Hope Value in order to build more affordable homes, but could I ask her to clarify whether it will also apply to wider projects for community benefits, such as playing fields? Udney Park in Teddington, in my constituency, has lain derelict for over a decade as successive owners have wanted to develop it, but they can't. There is a huge demand for community playing fields. The community wants to be able to access it. Will she assure me that actually the Hope Value changes will apply much more broadly than just affordable housing?
Well, I hope that the honourable member continues to engage, Madam Deputy Speaker, because we do want to make sure that we can go as wide as we possibly can so that we get the land that is needed, so that we can build the houses that we desperately need. And we're also doing work within the devolution bill, which will be coming forward around compulsory purchase on other assets of public value as well, which is not for building on, but again, touches on some of the points that the honourable member raises. We're also strengthening development corporations to make it easier to deliver the housing projects we need. These corporations delivered previous generations of new towns, and this Labour government is building on our post-war legacy by giving them enhanced powers to help deliver our next generation of new towns. These will be communities built with local people in mind, with the affordable housing, GP surgeries, schools and public transport that working people expect and need. I'll give way.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for giving way, and actually we have a mutual passion. I know I know the Deputy Prime Minister is a great fan of the work that His Majesty the King does in terms of the built environment and making sure there's a very high quality in terms of design. And one of the concerns that I think a lot of people have is seeing the quality of design eroded, and sort of a same design in Kent as it is in Staffordshire. Would the Deputy Prime Minister look at what could be done to actually enhance design codes? Because there feels as if there's been erosion of this, not an enhancement of it.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it reminds me of our time when we used to spar at the dispatch box, but I'm glad I'm on this side now. I beg to differ. Look, I think he's absolutely right about design, and we are covering that in our new towns, and he's right that His Majesty also feels very passionate about this, and I think everybody does, to be honest. Nobody wants to live in an ugly home, and actually design is really important, and it's different in different places. Yorkshire is different to Manchester brick, it's different to Devon, so making sure that that's part of the process, which is always crucial, is important, but not preventing us from getting forward, and that's why the MPPF, we clarified some of the issues around beautiful, Madam Deputy Speaker, which was holding up, but I want to reassure honourable members across the House that we do expect safe homes, we do expect beautiful homes, and we do expect homes that are fit for the future as well in terms of renewables and energy efficiency. To both meet our net zero ambitions and drive growth, the bill will also speed up approvals for clean energy projects. Some projects currently face waits of over 10 years, another legacy of Tory failure, with a first ready, first connected system replacing a flawed first come, first served approach. and £200 billion of investment unlocking growth through the Clean Power by 2030. Our reforms will protect households from the rollercoaster of foreign fossil fuel markets and usher in a new era of energy independence where despots like Putin can no longer have their boot on the nation's throat. Britain's electricity grid needs a 21st century overhaul to connect the right power in the right places, which is why our plans of vital energy projects are needed for clean power, including wind and solar projects, will be prioritised for grid connections. With those living within 500 metres of new pylons getting up to £250 a year off their electricity bills. Because we recognise the service of these communities by hosting the infrastructure that will lower everyone's energy bills.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for giving way, and she makes an important point about access to energy that all of our communities require, and I think it's particularly prominent in all of our minds at a time when we all recognise that food security is national security, that we don't fall into a trap of displacing high-quality agricultural land and that, in effect, energy becomes a new cash crop. Can the Deputy Prime Minister give an assurance to the House that we do not risk falling into this trap and that we won't displace high-quality agricultural land for energy in the first instance?
Well, I can reassure, and I gave him two chances, much like him, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can reassure the honourable member that we will protect high-quality agricultural land. Farmers have used land in various different ways throughout the decades and generations, but we do protect our high-quality agricultural land. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to turn to the measures in the bill on development and nature recovery. We have some incredibly important habitats and species in this country, and the government could not have been clearer in our manifesto that we are committed to improving outcomes for nature. I'll give way.
My right honourable friend for giving way, and can I congratulate her on a fantastic speech and a great piece of legislation which both turbocharges our plans to restore nature at scale and also build the homes that we need. Could I ask her to say a little bit more about how this bill could help us restore our precious chalk streams like the River Pang in my constituency?
Absolutely. This bill is about how we can do nature recovery and protect nature. So we think that this bill is a win-win. Under the previous government, we had all sorts of problems that were holding up, and we tried to work with the government. They wouldn't work with us when they were in government, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's why they're on that side of the House and we're on this side of the House and that we're building. But I'm sure it's a shared goal across, by all members across this House that we want to improve outcomes for nature. But I'm also confident that no one here thinks the system is working well. Any set of rules that results in a £100 million bat tunnel is an outrage. I know those on the benches opposite agree, but they were determined to take a clumsy approach to fix nutrient neutrality that risks ripping up environmental protections and would not have worked. So thanks to a collective effort, a collaborative effort with organisations across development and the environmental sectors, our bill sets out a better way. That's a win-win for development and for nature. It establishes a nature restoration fund that will allow developers to make a simple payment to discharge their environmental obligations and to crack down on the building homes and infrastructure projects that we desperately need so that we can crack on. That money will then be used by Natural England to take the action needed, not just to avoid further decline in our natural world, but to see improvement. I'll give way.
Right, Honourable Lady, Deputy Prime Minister, for giving way. It's very reassuring to hear that she's so passionate about restoring nature. But how then can she explain why in Walsall planning permission has been allowed, having been refused by the local council, to allow a battery energy storage system on the Greenbelt?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to comment on individual projects, but we have been very clear, as is set out in this bill, about nature recovery and protecting our natural spaces. And it's how we will put talk of newts and nutrient neutrality behind us and get Britain building, whilst also stopping the pointless pitting of nature against development.
To the Deputy Prime Minister. In North Cumbria, because of the problems caused by the last government in not tackling nutrient neutrality, we are facing a very significant issue with regard to house building. So I very strongly welcome the provisions in this bill on the Nature Restoration Fund. Can I ask that the Department works with the local authority in the interim to come forward with mitigation schemes that will get house building going in North Cumbria in the interim?
Well, I thank my honourable friend from North Cumbria for raising this long-standing issue, and this government is already engaging with the local authority in the area, because absolutely right that for too long the previous government wasn't listening. I remember in the other place, Madam Deputy Speaker, I remember when I was in opposition, we tried to work on these issues and they refused to work with us. This bill is our reforms to mark a new era for Britain. We're turning the page on years of defeatism and decline, where a country of extraordinary talent and extraordinary capability has been held back by a system that's hobbled at every turn. With these landmark reforms, we're not just putting more money into the pockets of working people and strengthening communities, we're also taking a major step forward to secure our country's future for the long term. Getting Britain building again, getting growth going and paving the way for national renewal. This is real delivery. This is real change to transform the lives of millions of people for years to come. And I commend this statement to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Shadow Secretary of State, Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to lead the response on behalf of the opposition. And I first draw the House's attention to my registered members' interests, which includes over 30 years of business experience and interests in the property sector. We support some of the principles, aims and ambition of this bill, some of which builds on the work we undertook whilst in office, a period which included a record period for house building in this country. But we will also highlight our concerns in a number of areas. Whether the bill goes far enough to achieve its goals, the removal of a councillor's ability to vote on individual applications, the potentially toxic mix of disproportionately large increases of housing targets in rural areas, the grey belt Trojan horse, including the removal of any protections for villages, and the move to strategic plans, and also the ambition to build, of course, 1.5 million homes. Now, I realise the Secretary of State apparently is quite keen on spotting elephants, but she seems to have missed the huge one in this room, is that 1.5 million target is completely undeliverable. Happy to give way.
I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State giving way. And on Chapter 2, on subsection 3, it talks about the draft spatial development strategies, and it brings in a raft of changes of consulting with representative bodies on different racial, ethnic or national groups, but also different religious groups. Isn't there a danger here that we're starting to pit communities against another? Now, there's a legislative reason to do that. I wanted to intervene to ask the Secretary of State about that. Could he shine some light with his expertise as to why we're enshrining this into legislation?
Well, it's right to support that particular requirement. It's something we'll be certainly talking to us when we lay amendments to this bill going through the House. It's completely inappropriate, we believe, that certain groups should get prominence or preference over other groups in terms of consultations that might occur during the planning process. The ambition to build 1.5 million homes is all well and good, but the government has not yet set out exactly how it will do that. There are many questions about its deliverability. Certainly in the context of the February Global Construction Purchase Managers Index, which described one of the biggest monthly falls in house building construction on record, And indeed, the joint report by Savills, the Home Builders Federation and the National Housing Federation, which said that she would fall 500,000 short of her target. The government has not yet set out how many social or affordable homes it will deliver, or what measures it will put in place to help first-time buyers onto the housing ladder, particularly that they have scrapped Help to Buy and stamp duty discounts, which helped 1 million young people to buy their first home. Happy to give way.
Thank you, my honourable friend, for giving way. Does he agree with me that that housing targets mean very little if the government doesn't get a grip of immigration, which is causing massive demand on housing?
He's absolutely right to raise that point. The increase in population in this country is driving part of the reason we are seeing a rising need for housing, but also in terms of temporary accommodation, all which impact on that system. Is right to bring that point up. Happy to give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. The honourable member talked about missed targets and also talks about affordability. In 2010, the first of 16 housing ministers under the previous Conservative government boldly claimed, as many of his successors did, that the government would improve affordability of housing overall. But over the period that his government was in power, affordability reduced from 6.85 to 7.7 in terms of median house prices to wages. Could he explain that failure to the House?
He fails to acknowledge there's quite a few different housing ministers under Labour's previous tenure as well, to be fair. But he makes a very interesting point, a very important point, which I'm very happy to answer to. Of course, we want to build more houses to tackle the overall affordability problems. And as I say, that in terms of social housing, during that